Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, last time as we wrapped up the book of Daniel, we were well into the Persian Empire. As a matter of fact, we were already past, I think, the reign of Cyrus the Great, who was king over the Persian Empire. Well, tonight as we begin another book, the Book of Ezra, we're going to be kind of going back to the very first year of the reign of Cyrus over the Persian Empire. And Cyrus is a man that we should already know something about. As a matter of fact, there has already been prophecy about a man named Cyrus that was going to come along. And can anybody tell me who prophesied about Cyrus? Named him by name. I'll give you a hint. It starts with an I. Isaiah. You don't have to turn there, but I'm in Isaiah 44. And this is what Isaiah says through inspiration of God. He says, I am the Lord who made all things, who alone stretched out the heavens, who spread out the earth by myself, who frustrates the signs of liars and makes fools of diviners, who turns wise men back and makes their knowledge foolish, the Lord who confirms the word of his servant and fulfills the counsel of his messengers. And notice what he says from here to the end. Who says of Jerusalem, she shall be inhabited, and of the cities of Judah, they shall be built, and I will raise up their ruins. Who says to the deep, be dry, I will dry up your rivers. And who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall fulfill all my purpose. Saying of Jerusalem, she shall be built, and of the temple, your foundation shall be laid. I know that's kind of a lengthy reading to start out with there, but the reason that I read that is because to me what really stands out there is he calls Cyrus his shepherd. And to me what he's saying there, and I may be off base a little bit, but I feel like what he's saying there is God is using Cyrus to carry out his purpose, to carry out his plan. And does anybody know when we're talking about Cyrus, no, I'm sorry, when we're talking about Isaiah and this prophecy right here, how long ago that would have been before where we are now in the Bible story? A little bit more than that, I think. Do what? Where I studied, it said about 200 years. So you're not far off base there, but about 200 years. But even if it were 150, you're talking about 200 years before Jerusalem was ever even taken in, before the people were ever even taken into captivity. This man Cyrus is named by name in God's word. That's amazing to me. And then 200 years later, this happens in the book of Ezra. If you're not there already, let's go ahead and turn to Ezra chapter 1. First of all, I hope we're all on the same page here that from the last class, we all know that the 70 years is up, right? If you remember, Daniel knew from the study of Isaiah that it was time for the captivity to be over, and that 70 years was up. Let me go there right quick. Jeremiah 25. You don't have to go there, but I'd like to read that real quick. Listen to what Jeremiah says. And I know we've studied this already. But he says this about Jerusalem and about the children of Israel. He says, "Behold, I will send for all the tribes of the north, declares the Lord, and for Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant. And I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants, and against all these surrounding nations. I will devote them to destruction and make them a horror, a hissing, and an everlasting desolation. Moreover, I will banish from them the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the grinding of the millstones and the light of the lamp. This whole land shall become a ruin, a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years." So that's from the prophet Isaiah. And as Daniel was reading that, Daniel knew how long they had been there, and he knew that that time period was up. So, we are transitioning here as we begin the book of Ezra from one Bible period to another one. Captivity is over, and we're starting the period of the return and rebuilding. Is there anything else that anybody would like to mention before we actually get into the book of Ezra? All right, verse 1. "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah," we read that, "might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth, the Lord of God of heaven has given me, and he has commanded me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah." So again, we see here that Cyrus is God's vessel, so to speak. God is using Cyrus to send his people back and to allow them to rebuild their city and rebuild the temple. And it wasn't only the Jew or the children of Israel that were allowed to go back to their homelands here. For our purpose, that's who we're studying. But understand that all the nations were now under control of the Persian Empire. And it would have been exiles from all of these nations that were allowed to go back to their homelands and serve their gods and rebuild their cities that had been torn down. But for our purpose here in the Bible story, we're only talking about the children of Israel that are going to be allowed to go back home. Verse 3. He says, Cyrus continues in that writing. He says, "Who is among you of all his people? May his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is God, which is in Jerusalem. And whoever is left in any place where he dwells, let the men of his place help him with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, besides the free will offerings for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem." Then verse 5 says, "Then the heads of the fathers' houses of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites, with all whose spirits God had moved, arose to go up and build the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. And all those who were around them encouraged them with articles of silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with precious things, besides all that was willingly offered." So I'm going to stop right there. And as Cyrus wrote this, what do you think the feelings of the people might have been overall? Excited, right? And we're going to see that here in a little bit. Now, there's going to be some that are not so excited, and that's going to be your older people. So really what we're going to see, the way I understand this, is you're going to see kind of a division here. Who are the people that are going to return home? Not all of them are going to return home, but who does it say the people that are going to go home are in verse 5? Those whose what? Yes, those whose spirits God has moved. In other words, there were some of the people that were old enough to remember what it would have been like before this captivity. You remember what Jeremiah told them to do? What did Jeremiah tell them to do when it was time to go to captivity? Did he tell them, hurry up and get what you need done because you're coming home quick? No. He told them they were going to be there a long time. He told them to go ahead and marry, to build their houses, to get settled in, and to prosper, because they were going to be in that land for a long time. Now, some of them are going to remember what it was like before that, and they have a passion for Jerusalem. They had a passion for wanting to worship there at the temple. Okay? Those are the ones whose spirits were moved to go back. They loved it there. It would be kind of like us, per se. You know, our descendants are not from here. If you go back far enough, our descendants are from somewhere else. But if your descendants were from Ireland and somebody said, hey, Carrie, you have the opportunity to go back and live in Ireland where your ancestors were from, would you want to do that? You would? That's not the answer I was looking for, Carrie. Most of us would say no. We like it here because this is where we're settled in. But some of them had a passion to want to go back. And that was mainly the people of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin, and the tribe of Levi. And then those that didn't go back, what does it say they did? Were they just bystanders and did nothing? They supported them, right? They were behind them, and if they needed something, they were to help provide whatever it was they needed. All right. Anything through verse 6?
You know, when we come to the New Testament, this plays a big factor into synagogues already setting up in places and the gospel spreading the way it does because everybody didn't go back.
Exactly. There was a big advantage for everybody not going back. And I'm glad you brought that up because I was wanting to point that out, but I was about to forget to. But one of the good things about everybody not going back was, like Alan said, they had already set up their synagogues, and if everybody would have went back, we would be in trouble today because the gospel wouldn't have been able to have spread like it did in the first century if they would have all went back to Jerusalem. So that's a good point there. Anything else through verse 6? All right, another thing that happened in verse 7, it says, King Cyrus also brought out the articles of the house of the Lord which Nebuchadnezzar took from Jerusalem and put in the temple of his gods. If you remember when Nebuchadnezzar besieged the city, when he took Daniel and his friends, he also took things out of these gold and silver things from the temple and took them to Babylon with him. Well, Cyrus is giving those things back. In verse 8 it says, Cyrus, king of Persia, brought them out by the hand of Merodach, the treasurer, and counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. So basically they become Sheshbazzar's responsibility. Now, there's a few places through this lesson here that I have questions about that I'm not able to answer, and maybe some of y'all may know. But if I understood this correctly, Sheshbazzar is not a name that a lot of us are familiar with, right? But we are familiar with the name Zerubbabel, right? Two things could be in place here. Number one, either these two guys could have worked, it was two separate people, and they could have worked really closely together on this same job, or Sheshbazzar might be another name for Zerubbabel, and it's the same person. And I know in Bob Waldron's book, he pointed out that he sort of leaned toward it being the latter. He leans towards this Sheshbazzar is Zerubbabel, who was going to be the governor, basically, of those that returned. He's the one that the gold and silver articles are going to be placed in his responsibility. Yeah, and that could very well be the case. That, sort of like Daniel's and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah. All right, and then verse 9 through 11, it tells what gold and silver articles were brought back, and in verse 11, it tells a total number. There were 5,400. And all these Sheshbazzar took with the captives who were brought from Babylon, took them back to Jerusalem. All right, chapter 2. We are not going to say a whole lot about chapter 2 because basically what it does is it gives an account, a very detailed genealogy type account of the families that return, and it goes through there and names them by name, and it basically provides some sort of a census. It also, and by the way, since I tell you that it's a census, the total number of people that returned is going to be almost 50,000. I think it's maybe 49,000 something people that returned there. And that sounds like a huge number, but if you take all of the people, all of the exiles, and put them all together, that would not have been that many. But there's nearly 50,000 returning. 7,000 of those would have been the servants of those Israelites that are returning back to the land. Also, it gives an account of a family there in chapter 2 that they were of the tribe of Levi, but in order to serve as a priest, even if you were from the tribe of Levi, what did you have to do? What did you have to prove? That you were of the family of Aaron. Well, this particular family somehow or another had lost their proof of this, and they were not able to prove that they were of the family of Aaron. So they were allowed to return, but they were not allowed to serve as priests. And that account is given in chapter 2 as well. And then probably the main thing that we need to take from that chapter is at the very end of it, and that is that the main idea here is that all of these people, all 49,000 of them, are going to be led back to Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel and the high priest whose name is Jeshua. Jeshua is the high priest. And it seems like him and Zerubbabel work really close together, leading the people. See, this kind of reminds me of the way they were carried to captivity. They were carried in waves, right? Well, they're also going to come back in waves. All the people don't come back at one time. As a matter of fact, Ezra hasn't even came back yet. Ezra's still in Babylon. We're not even going to see Ezra until we get over to chapter 7. But this first wave is going to be led by Zerubbabel and Jeshua, the high priest. All right. Anything else on chapter 2? Y'all gonna have to start talking because we're going through this way too fast.
Verse 68, 69, just showed their willingness to go. Talks about how willing they were to offer, how we start the temple.
Yeah.
You see a willingness of the people.
Yep.
But as we've been going through the Bible story, we've been trying to catch the thread of this Messiah coming through. And Zerubbabel is the next one in the lineage of Christ.
He is. Mm-hmm. All right, chapter 3. Chapter 3 and verse 1, it says, when the 7th month had come, and the children of Israel were in the cities, the people gathered together as one man to Jerusalem. So the people have came back, and it seems that they all have went back to their cities that they lived in. Now, did they go back to a wonderful, beautiful, immaculate Jerusalem that they knew before? No. What did they go back to? Ruins, yes. They went back to ruins. And I suppose they went back to their own cities to kind of start trying to get everything cleaned up and built back there and maybe making their homes. And I think Alan and Gerald Wednesday night will be kind of touching on some of that more. But in the 7th month, which would be in the fall of the year, it would be September of October, when that month came, all of the children of Israel that went back there came together as one in Jerusalem. And in verse 2 it says, then Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and his brethren, the priest, and Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and his brethren, arose and built the altar of the God of Israel to offer burnt offerings on, as it is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Though fear had come upon them because of the people of those countries, they set the altar on its bases, and they offered burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening burnt offerings. And they also kept the Feast of Tabernacles, as it is written, and offered the daily burnt offerings in the number required by ordinance for each day. So, as they gathered together here in the fall, they want to start getting busy doing what? What do they want to get started doing immediately? What'd you say? Yes, things the Lord would want them to do, right. They want to get started serving the Lord. The temple has not even began to be built back yet. The foundation has not even been started yet. It's about to be, but it hasn't. But they want to go ahead and get this altar built and get busy offering sacrifices and serving the Lord the best they can. Even though the circumstances here may not be perfect, they want to get started doing that the best that they possibly can. And in verse 4, that the Feast of Tabernacles, that was something that happened in the 7th month. If you go back to Leviticus and read that, in the 7th month of every year, on the 15th day of that month, there was like a whole week devoted to this Feast of Tabernacle, also sometimes called the Feast of Booths. And they were to observe this every year. So it just so happens as they're together here, it's time to do that, and they go ahead and observe that while they're there in verse 4. Verse 5. Afterwards, they offered the regular burnt offering and those for new moons and for all the appointed feasts of the Lord that were consecrated, and those of everyone who willingly offered a free will offering to the Lord. From the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, although the foundation of the temple of the Lord had not been laid. So basically that just sums up what I said a while ago. I think they just wanted to get started even before they started building the temple. They didn't want these sacrifices and offerings to go undone. They wanted to do everything they could possibly do to please God. And then in verse 7 it says they also gave money and there was some supplies brought there in order to give them support and help. Anything through verse 7?
I know the land has been desolate for a while, but many people have moved into that area. So you would wonder how they would receive them coming back like that. That's what each sort of showed a little concern about it.
Yeah. And we're going to see here when we get to chapter 4 that they're not received very well. We're going to talk about them here in just a minute. Okay. When we get to chapter 3, verse 8, remember that they came together in the fall. Well, it seems that they went back to their homes for the winter, and then in early spring, they come back together in the second month of the second year. So this would be the second year after they had come back to Jerusalem from Babylon. They want to start that year off right. In the second month, it says in verse 8, Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, Jeshua the son of Jozadak, and the rest of their brethren, the priests and the Levites, and all those who had come out of the captivity to Jerusalem, began work and appointed the Levites from 20 years old and above to oversee the work of the house of the Lord. Then Jeshua with his sons and brothers, Kadmiel with his sons, and the sons of Judah, arose as one to oversee those working on the house of God. The sons of Henadad with their sons and their brethren, the Levites. You know, one thing that kind of stands out to me there, and I didn't even have this written down here, but as I read it here, the closeness that they worked together with here. You know, that's pretty encouraging. They all have, it seems like, the same goal and have a task that needs to be done here. And you don't see a lot of division, do you? You see them working really close together to try to get this started. And this task here in particular is going to be the temple itself in verse 8 and 9. So things seem like, how do things seem like they're going so far? Yeah, they're going really well. So let's move on down. Let's read verse 10. Chapter 3, verse 10. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests stood in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord according to the ordinance of David, king of Israel. And they sang responsively, praising and giving thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever towards Israel. Then all the people shouted with a great shout, and when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. So Alan mentioned a while ago when I asked how you thought the people felt about being back, we kind of get a picture of how they feel here. As the temple begins to get started, the first thing they do is they lay the foundation. And when we see there in verse 10 that the foundation is complete, this is not even the whole temple. This is just the foundation that it's going to set on. When that is completed, it's a big deal. Now, do you see the people here stand back and hook their thumbs in their sleeves there and say, look what we've done? What do? They praise God. It says they sing responsively. And I know when I went back and listened to this, Lonnie kind of pointed that out, that singing responsively kind of stood out to him. Because think about when we sing. How are we, what are the songs that we offer up to God in worship service? What are they supposed to be like? They're not mere words, are they? It's feelings, right? A lot of times we're offering up worship and feelings of emotion and thanks to Him, and that's what we see here. When we sing, when we offer up worship, it needs to be responsively, right? Because of what God has done for us. Any comments through 11? All right, let's move on to verse 12. This is interesting. And this is probably one of those verses that I'm not exactly sure what's going on here, but we can talk about it. It says, many of the priests and Levites and heads of the fathers' houses, old men who had seen the first temple, wept with a loud voice. So you have this new foundation laid there, and the generation that it seems like maybe the younger generation and came back and helped build this, they're excited about it. They are overjoyed with excitement for that the foundation of the temple has been relaid. But how do those who are old enough to remember what the first one looked like feel? Yeah, they weep. They're not so excited. It says the old men who had seen the first temple wept with a loud voice when the foundation of this temple was laid before their eyes, yet many shouted aloud for joy. Yeah. I don't know if it's tears of joy here, if it's weeping because of joy over what has taken place. That they've been in captivity. Jerusalem has been desolate. This temple has been destroyed, and now it's being built back. Or if it's the fact that they remember what Solomon's temple looked like, and this is not near what Solomon's temple was. Any comments on that? Yeah. That's what I've got wrote down here, that you can have more than one emotion at the same time. That's right. They could have wept because it wasn't as grand as the first temple, but they also might have been, at the same time, been overjoyed for what was taking place. Where did you find? Where does it say that? Okay.
Glory of the Lord, not so much the physical building.
Okay.
It says you can't discern the difference of one shouting and one weeping.
Yeah.
To me, it feels like it's two different feelings being done.
Yes. I think so too, Karen.
Both of them will be very emotional, whether you've been there before or this is your first time being there.
Yeah.
I can only imagine if you had grown up seeing the temple and stuff, and then you get carried off into captivity thinking, well, I don't know if I'll ever see that again.
Right.
Here, laying the foundation of this thing.
Yeah.
Very emotional.
Huh?
They were glad to be home.
Yes, sir. They were. And things seem like they're going really well at the end of chapter 3. Everybody's, like I said a while ago, they're working together. The task is being accomplished, and it's almost like this temple is fixing to just shoot up, right? I mean, that's the picture that I get. But then when chapter 4 comes, we're going to see something totally different happen here. And Alan was talking a while ago about the people that were there. So the people that they're going to be going back to, the children of Israel are not going to be welcomed by those people who are already living there. If you remember, when Assyria came and took the northern kingdom of Israel, different people came down there, and the people of Israel started intermarrying with a different race, right? And that's how we came up with what we call the Samaritans. And that was the people that were living in the land now, okay? So what they basically did is they kind of worshiped, they added Jehovah God to their worship, but they mixed it with pagan worship as well. So we'll see that as we go through chapter 4 here. Let's go ahead and get into that. In 1 and 2, verse 1, it says, "Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin," that means their enemies, "heard that the descendants of the captivity were building the temple of the Lord God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' houses and said to them, 'Let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do, and we have sacrificed to him since the days of Esarhad, king of Assyria, who brought us here.'" So they basically tell Zerubbabel there and the leaders of the children of Israel that we serve. To me, it sounds really kind of sarcastic that to tell them that we serve the same God you do. They're kind of trying to trick them into letting them help them. Because what do you think they might do here? What do you think these enemies might try to do here? Yeah, they might try to stand in the way, right? Stand in the way of this job getting done, because you got to remember, these people, they've set their lives up there and they're prospering, and they don't want to see these people come back and be able to build back as strong as what they were. But look at the response that Zerubbabel and Jeshua give them in verse 3. It says, "Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' houses of Israel said to them, 'You may do nothing with us to build a house for our God, but we alone will build to the Lord God of Israel as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us.'" So it's almost like Zerubbabel sees right through what they're trying to do here. And they show great leadership by not letting that influence come in and hinder the work. All right, verse 4. "Then the people of the land tried to discourage the people of Judah, and they troubled them in building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia." So what they're doing, they wouldn't let them help work on it. So what they're going to try to do is they're just going to basically harass them in every way that they possibly can. They're going to, the way I understand it, they try to scare them. They try to worry them. They try to harass them. Just every way they can possibly stand in the way of them building this temple back. That's what they're going to try to do. Now, verse 5, where it says Cyrus, king of Persia, until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. In 530 BC, Cyrus is going to be killed in battle. Okay? And he's going to have a son named Cambyses. And his name is not mentioned here, but if I understand it correctly, Cambyses, Cyrus's son, is called by the title Ahasuerus in verse 6. So it says in the reign of Ahasuerus, this would be Cyrus's son, if I understand it correctly. In the beginning of his reign, they wrote an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. In the days of Artaxerxes also, and if I understand it, Artaxerxes is another title that this same man would have went by. So this is the same person if I understand it correctly. And so Ahasuerus, one title, Artaxerxes, another title. But these enemies of the Jews are going to pen this letter in Aramaic, which would have been the official language of Persia and the proper way to write a letter to the king. They're going to pen the letter to the King Cyrus's son. Now remember, Cyrus was the one that issued the decree, right? I want you to notice this letter. Let's start in verse 11. It says, this is a copy of the letter that they sent him. To King Artaxerxes from your servants, the men of the region beyond the river, and so forth. Let it be known to the king that the Jews who came up from you have come to us at Jerusalem and are building the rebellious and evil city and are finishing its walls and repairing the foundations. Let it now be known to the king that if this city is built and the walls completed, they will not pay tax, tribute, or custom, and the king's treasury will be diminished. Now, because we received support from the palace, it was not proper for us to see the king's dishonor. Therefore, we have sent and informed the king. Boy, they're laying it on really thick, aren't they? Right here. Trying to sound big and proper and like they're just laying it on. Verse 15. They won't a search may be made in the book of the records of your fathers, and you will find in the book of the records and know that this city is a rebellious city, harmful to kings and provinces, and that they have incited sedition within the city in former times, for which cause this city was destroyed. I find that interesting because they want him to go back and search the records, and if they went back and searched the records, the king would find that these people the Jews were troublemakers, basically. But if they went back and searched the correct records, if they went back and searched the records of Cyrus, what would they find? That they're doing what Cyrus told them to do. But nowhere in this letter do they mention that, do they? They leave that out, and obviously it's on purpose. Verse 16, we inform the king that if this city is rebuilt and its walls are completed, the result will be that you will have no dominion beyond the river. So that was their letter. In other words, if you let them build this city back, it's going to cost you your power in this region. So the king read it, and this was his answer. Let's start in verse 18. He says, the letter which you sent to us has been clearly read before me, and I gave the command, and a search has been made, and it was found that this city in former times has revolted against kings, and rebellion and sedition have been fostered in it. There have also been mighty kings over Jerusalem who have ruled over all the region beyond the river, and tax, tribute, and custom were paid to them. Now, this is very important, verse 21. Give the command to make these men cease, that this city may not be built until the command is given by me. Take heed now that you do not fail to do this. Why should damage increase to the herd of the kings? Now when the copy of King Artaxerxes' letter was read before Rehum, Shimshai the scribe, and their companions, they went up in haste to Jerusalem against the Jews, and by force of arms made them cease. Verse 24 says, thus the work of the house of God which is at Jerusalem ceased, and it was discontinued until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So, it brings up a question. Why? And I think Alan and Gerald are going to try to probably tackle this question Wednesday night. Why would these people not send another letter to the king and say, look, we're doing what we were told to do? All they had to do was ask. And maybe he would have looked into it and he would have found that they were doing what his father told them to do, and everything would have been fine. But they didn't. They didn't even make an attempt. It says that the work stopped It was discontinued. And it seems like now what they're going to do is they're going to go back home to their houses and they're going to start putting all their focus on working on their own homes, working on building up their own houses, and the work of the house of the Lord is going to be left abandoned. And I'm going to leave that for Alan and Gerald to tackle Wednesday night. Any comments or questions before we stop?
You know, when it mentions about the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the descendants were coming back, and this is just my thinking, and I might be wrong in it, but I thought that was saying that because of what comes later. And I thought maybe they were genuine in the fact they wanted to help, and then when they were saying, no, you can't help us, they were like, okay, well, if we can't help you, you ain't going to do it. But I could be wrong. But the way I read it made me think.
So you're thinking they're genuine in wanting to help.
I thought so.
And you may be right. I may be reading that totally wrong.
But the fact that they said, you know, we serve God the same way you do, we know that's not correct.
Yeah.
As you had mentioned.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the story really one way or the other. It's
Right.
Just, I thought that was a reaction to how they said, you know, you cannot help us.
Interesting.
Very
Yeah.
Convert.
All right. Thank you for your comments.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.